I've been thinking a lot about a quote. Essentially, it says, every system is perfectly designed to output what it outputs. However, a system is made, whatever you're getting on the system, that's what it's designed to do. So if you want to change what's made, you need to change the design. I'm not sure that AI fully fits that mold because you could be as accurate as you want, and there is still technically the potential for something to come out that was unexpected.
Hello and welcome to Building Brand Gravity. I'm Ann Green. I'm CEO and principal at Sheryl Integrated Marketing Communications Group.
And I'm Steve Halsey, one of the principals and chief growth officers of that same group, and welcome you to our latest episode of Building Brand Gravity. And you want to let everybody know what's in store?
Yeah, we're doing a little two-part series here, a mini-series, if you will. The first one was focused on AI research and sort of the evolution of where it's at in our industry right now. And that industry is not just communications, it's really across marketing. And then for today, we're going to be speaking with one of our own in the group, who I'll talk about in just a moment, discussing about how we go from AI exploration really to enablement, especially in the context of some of our largest sectors. So I'm excited to build on the conversation we had last time, Steve.
Yeah, it should be great. And Greg is always a great interview, great friend of the pod, as I like to joke. And my conversation with Greg Gallant, who's the co-founder and CEO of Muckrack, was really on for those of you, I hope you all listen to it, but if you haven't, you can, after you're done with this, you can go right over and click it. But it was really on the results of their latest research on the state of AI. Basically, AI is the new normal in PR. And there were some really interesting facts that we covered there. 75% of PR pros are now using generative AI. That's up from 28% just 18 months ago. Of those who are using it, 93% say it speeds up their work and 78% say it improves the quality of their work. Does that sound about right?
I think its adoption is growing fast. That feels very right to me. As I talk to leaders across the industry, as I talk to practitioners, and again, there's comms, there's, paid media, there's creative, digital, all of our teams, the teams that I know at other agencies. Adoption is growing fast.
I jotted down a list of there's 3 essential things for us to think about when we're talking about how we use AI for media relations, content creation, or analytics. And I'd love to get your reaction to them. Number 1 is defining the acceptable use and boundaries up front, where we specify how generative AI may be used for drafts, research, media list enhancement, sentiment analysis, things like that. Number 2, making sure you align on the data privacy, IP, and confidentiality protection. So you're very, very clear that you're only going to use AI tools and not train them on any data other than what you agree to. And then the third one is to really codify that governance, that disclosure, that risk mitigation, share our AI usage policy, all of those due diligence. So those are my top 3. Define the boundaries, align on privacy, and really codify your governance. I mean, how does that tie into what you're hearing?
I like those a lot. It's an interesting moment for sure. As I say many times, I'm out there talking about this a lot. There's 2 sides to every coin. There's the amazing power of it, and then there's the with power comes great responsibility, and there's the challenge of it too, the deep fakes, the AI slop at scale and things like that, right? So what's interesting about our colleagues in procurement and legal, so being on the agency side, obviously, and working so closely with clients, those are their peers in-house. These are our partners and peers, across that partnership relationship. It's coming at them fast. And the problem is there is a lot of challenge with these tools. There's protection of intellectual property. There's hallucinations have been reduced, but not entirely. There's the question of the transparency of usage. There's a question of, I think there's going to be an essential question of what are we paying for? The machine, the human, what is the nature of this relationship? So one of the watch outs we're seeing is that as these respected groups, they play a really important function in our client organizations, obviously. They are trying to catch up to something that's just the horses running out of the barn. It's like a whole fleet of horses. It's just a stampede flying out of the barn. And they're trying to catch up to put it in language and legal documentation and questionnaires to be like, how are you using this? So in some cases, we're seeing organizations that are very large come back with AI addendums that are huge, long, and overly restrictive, because the fact is AI is baked into everything. I mean, I got my little phone right here, it's everywhere, and it's baked into the tools, and it's being baked in ways Greg would say this, where it's changing every day. So those overly detailed and restrictive and kind of saying, well, you almost can't use AI at all, it's just not feasible. And I think those groups know that. Others are trying to do, I think, what you said, Steve, which is, how do we make sure we're talking about use cases to begin with? How do we make sure there's a transparent discussion? Like, I would like my own people, our people at GNS to be transparent about, hey, I got this, I'm using generative to get me going on a draft, but I'm also using my brains and my expertise to edit it and make it better. So I think that we're seeing the normal sort of churn in this fast moving landscape, but I don't envy our legal and procurement colleagues. This is challenging.
It's definitely challenging for them, and definitely people on the brand side too, with their teams to work through. So I guess what I would say is, we're all in this together. So, if you're a agency listener, let's work with our friends at the PRC and really help kind of educate. If you're on the client side, just really think about even leaning in and reaching out to the PRC yourself, even though you're not an agency, for best use guidelines so that we can help you kind of work within your system with procurement, with legal, to really put together something that makes sense for everybody.
I agree, because ultimately it's our partnership together that's going to find out where the value in our work will be long term, where we automate rote tasks and get faster to the value that matters. And we're only going to figure this out, agencies and clients together, really in concert. And that's actually a good transition to our guest for today. Our guest is Lauren King. He is a senior digital marketing specialist at one of our two agencies, Morgan Myers, a GNS agency. And he's part of our AI exploration and enablement team. So he's very, very knowledgeable. We have some super users across our two agencies, across the group. Every specialist group, every sector and discipline that we offer, and that group's been such an amazing brain trust as we move from more exploration to rubber on the road and putting all the tools in people's hands, doing all the training, and starting a deeper transformation process. So what I wanted to talk with Lauren about, Greg gave us that 10,000 or 100,000 foot view of how adoption is changing. And I think that conversation you guys had so many cool aspects to it. He's got a really great bird's eye view. Lauren is in the ground, especially literally on the ground with our clients in ag and our clients in food. He is a real specialist, excuse me, in many aspects of ag and technology as adoption. So what he and I are going to talk about, and I'm excited for folks to hear, what are we seeing on the ground in terms of tools and approaches and use cases, and also driving more engagement? How is he an advocate for that self-education and upskilling that we all need to do, both as companies, but as individuals? And the third view he has is, it's really hard to just say, well, what can AI do? Because the answer is everything. It's more about what problems can we solve. So let's listen to the conversation with Lauren, and Steve, I'm sure we'll have stuff to talk about afterwards.
I can't wait.
So here on Building Brand Gravity, we are interested, like everyone else in the world, in the evolution of AI, especially in the marketing and communication space in which we work across many, many sectors. And I'm excited to have a conversation with a colleague of mine, a fairly new colleague of mine, and that person is Lauren King. Hey, Lauren, how are you?
Doing pretty good myself.
Excellent, excellent. So just a little background. Lauren is a senior digital marketing specialist at Morgan Myers, working on many different agriculture and food clients. But I love, Lauren, that you have such a background that's really rooted in that space, literally. A farming family. You were growing up in southwest side of Michigan. And I think what's really interesting for this conversation is not only is Lauren a specialist in digital and all those pieces, very much an integrated set of capabilities, as many of us work in today, but also doing things like chairing the American Farm Bureau Technology Advisory Committee and working with Agriculture Future of America Alumni Advisory Committee, speaking at, different types of venues that are digging into AI. So just to get us started, Lauren, so tell us where you're coming from today and what home is like for you in that part of Michigan.
Yeah, like you hinted at, I'm in Southeast Michigan, which is between basically Toledo on one side and Ann Arbor on the other. That's the easiest reference for many people. Right now, I look out my window, I can see at least one tractor and planter combination. I think they're planting soybeans, but the fields by me are a mix of soybeans, pumpkins, corn. We did have peppers last year. We'll see if that happens again. So we're very, very diverse, very agriculturally diverse. I'm 10 minutes from the nearest town, which is a small main street, and that's it. I'm 20 minutes from the nearest Walmart. And that's largely my experience growing up. But thankfully, we have great internet.
I love that. So, you're working heavily in digital, but when I first met you, we bonded over many things, many different points of interest, but especially the evolution of technology today and AI. So, first, I'd like to hear a little bit about how you describe your digital role at Morgan Myers as part of the GNS group. And then after that, I have a follow up question, but why don't you talk about the kinds of work you're doing now in the digital space?
Yeah. So I'm part of our digital team at Morgan Myers, which means that we touch a lot of different clients. I don't have one specific client that I work with day to day, although Merck Animal Health Cattle would probably be my primary. And my role specifically ties a lot into systems management, whether that's the back end of digital ads, our social listening capabilities, so tracking trends in real time, deploying AI when possible. That's been a big part of what I've done the last 6 months to a year or so, and websites, really anything that a system within digital touches is where I tend to specialize. So that can take the form of pushing out an ad campaign one day, the next day it's understanding how a client's product is viewed online, and then the day after that, having a conversation like this, focusing on how we can use AI tools in different ways within Morgan Myers.
I love the agency context and especially the kind of role you play because it is so diverse. And it's also naturally keeps you as a learner. You have to continuously learn and grow. So, talking about learning, and this conversation you and I are having is part of a small series we're doing on AI as part of building brand gravity. We've been having ongoing conversations. It's something I'm obviously very interested in, as you know. But I want to go way back in time because it was so interesting talking to you about this and preparing for this conversation. When did you start your AI journey? What was the thing that alerted you to this coming wave?
So, as a kid, we always had stories with robots and even Star Wars and examples like that. But when it really hit me that AI could be something that could be used was around 2013. And a lot of people don't know that Google basically pioneered a lot of the innovations that make tools like ChatGPT and Copilot accessible and available today. So they were doing some work. There was blogs coming out kind of explaining the underpinnings of how this all works. And this is far beyond what I could understand at the time, but it got enough press and buzz that I was able to take a look, start hearing words like LLM or large language model for the first time. And when I looked at it, of course, even though it was in a language I didn't really speak, which is algorithms and data science, my interest was piqued because I didn't realize that you could actually do anything with artificial intelligence. To that point, I thought it was something held in Asimov novels in the future of Star Trek.
I love that. I mean, that was 12 years ago. And clearly, there's many folks out there, maybe some of our listeners, that understand that AI has been out there developing for quite a long time, not just theoretically, but practically. But I love the idea that your journey has been so long and that you started to try to get hands-on right away because you and I have a little bit of an age difference. I'm going to assume you're quite young, 12 years ago. I had started hearing about it as well. And I think it's interesting to think back to that moment, as you said, like, what did you think it was? So when you first heard terms like large language models, or you first heard terms about the idea of AI, I don't know if generative AI was used in that context then, but AI overall.
In common.
Yeah, I feel like that has been, especially ChatGPT, one of the biggest innovations. The common nomenclature of generative AI is something different from maybe predictive but when you first heard of large language models and AI overall back, when you were a teenager still, what did you think it would be and what you could do with it versus how you're seeing it and using it today? What's that delta between the two?
Yeah. So when I was hearing about it, it was very much within the realm of academia that it was being considered and deployed and where I was thinking it would be used. So I'm picturing, giant Excel files with millions and millions of lines, letting some type of machine learning tool loose to analyze it and find some trends, or maybe being able to go back and review what has already existed or apply government statistical analysis to data coming out of the USDA, those types of intense situations, not something that the everyday person would probably run into very much, almost validating existing data more than creating. I do think that I read a little bit about creating images to the point of they thought it wouldn't really ever work because there was no way to make the hallucinations coming out of an AI tool cohesive in a way that somebody would actually get what they want. You could make something, but it didn't actually make any sense. Kind of like the early days of DALL-E. I'm sure if you experimented with it, you got some really interesting stuff. I've got some saved on my phone, but for me, it just seemed like it would be stuck in the realm of academia and statistical research, and it wouldn't ever be something that I could truly see myself using, my dad using on the farm, or deploying in a business context. I was very cool.
I think my version of that is, in the sectors I've worked in, which are many, including agriculture now, which I love engaging in, and you have so much depth there. But I would see it in terms of health and medical innovation. So things like high throughput screening, which is critical to the drug discovery process, things like other types of, like the way that AlphaFold is working on protein folding. And so I was thinking about it more in the scientific context too. And it's very interesting now to see it leap into a space that is really transforming everything we touch. I think the other piece for me that made a lot of sense is there was such a buzz, even almost that far back, about big data. If you might remember, that was such the buzzword. There's always a buzzword, but big data was the thing. And I think what the issue was big data was there, but what do you do with it and how do you deal with it, especially when the big data is big, like you said, the USDA stats or data points. So, I really resonate with that. So there's been so much going on and the evolution is so fast. Like you said, if you created pictures in DALL-E a few years ago, they are quite amusing compared to what it can do today, which is
there were some interesting ones.
Yes. And all the weirdness with human form and human hands and all the stuff we know, right? It feels like so long ago, but it was only like a year and a half ago. But when you see everything that's evolving, and you and I talk about this a lot, and our AI enablement team across both GS Business Communications and Morgan Myers talks about this, what are to you some of the most notable and important evolutions that you've been tracking that you think are really material to the work you do and that we do?
Well, we actually have one that's new as of today or within the last 24 hours, which is OpenAI focusing ChatGPT as an everything app, going beyond search and creation into, I'm not sure if you've seen their shopping edition that they have. Yes, so they're integrating with Shopify and they're going to be recommending products based on very specific search terms, no ads, only going off of the metadata of the product and your personal preferences from your prior time using the tool. So that'll primarily apply to paid accounts. But if I have been doing a lot of researching for a trip to Italy, it'll incorporate my preferences when I then ask it to recommend a bath towel that fits for a beach and can go into luggage. It's a big change, and it's a reason to not leave the app. It's a reason to have better SEO if you're working from a marketing perspective, because that's going to be really, really important. And it changes the way that consumers are going to interact, but it's also changing how I'm going to interact with a tool like ChatGPT, or Copilot will have it before too long. Everybody else will as well. Another one that comes to mind is integrating with other apps. We're still on the edge of what that looks like. I can't log into my Facebook account through ChatGPT yet. I can't log into my United Airlines account through ChatGPT or Copilot yet. But once you can, that's when eventually you get to agentic tools, which I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit more, but making my digital life more cohesive and having an assistant. So taking the shopping side and becoming an everything app is one, connecting to all your other apps is the other. Those are the two that I've been paying the most attention to.
I think those are so material to our work and to our lives as humans. I mean, that's the thing. This is going to be woven in absolutely everywhere. And the way we talk about AI today, and by the way, one of the things, Lauren, that really bugs me is when we're not precise when we talk about AI. We just use this big old acronym when, are we talking about something that's more predictive, cognitive, generative? But the fact is that it will be that inside everything and sort of the web that connects us in a way. And it is interesting. You talked about SEO. There's been so much discussion recently about, is this the end, the death of search engine optimization? I tend to be very skeptical when anyone says something is dead, because it's usually alive somehow. My agency life would have been gone a long time ago if I listened to all of those things, because we're still here. But this idea of AI optimization, how are you optimizing for the large language models and how they're crawling the web in a very different way and how they're ingesting information. And so I love that you're thinking about that from a digital perspective, because our clients absolutely have to think about that, right?
Absolutely. And not just SEO, but how SEO and your imagery work together. It's a little bit of a unique experience, but we've been developing a chatbot for a client that connects to food. And one thing that emerged as we were making the chatbot is that it was scanning not just the recipes that we had, but it was scanning the images associated with the recipes as well. And it would recommend something different. So for example, if you were to search for like red, white, and blue or 4th of July, all of a sudden you're getting, foods that aren't connected to 4th of July, even though they have some in this website, but show cherries or blueberries and then like a whitish looking dough in the meal or in the baked good itself. And it understood, like the tool understood that. And so even your imagery becomes an extension of your SEO in a sense, if you're trying to predict what people are looking for.
Yeah, it's kind of like a supercharging of what Google has tried to do with Google image search. And obviously Google is working hard, the way it's incorporated Gemini at the top of the search page, not to lose, its brand and the dominance it's had. But I think it's going to be really, really hard at this point for Google to maintain a chokehold on that. We're already seeing so much use of ChatGPT, just as one example, through the app. And from a business development perspective, more and more we're hearing, oh, we found your agency through ChatGPT, which is not to surprise me at all when we see the kind of search volume that's growing around it.
1 billion searches last week, according to Sam Altman.
Yes, so much change. So thinking about the ground level of this, and that's why I was so excited to speak to you, like many firms, and especially on the agency side, because I talk to folks on the corporate side, agency side, many of our clients. We don't have a lot of restrictions on the agency side about how we experiment. We have very specific guidelines. As you know, Lauren, I'm very focused on ethics. We've been part of the PR Council's work in ethical use of AI for communications, respect intellectual property. We're very careful about IP protection and also the ownership of creatives, how things are being used, right? So we take that really seriously. But in terms of experimenting on the upside, there's very little to hold us back. So what I wanted to talk to you about today was really that ground level. How do digital and marketing and comms professionals, how are we benefiting from use of AI in our day-to-day work? How are we exploring? And what are we hoping our colleagues do, say at GNS and Morgan Myers and other places? And, I see it as there's the working smarter, not harder. There's solving persistent problems and pain points. There's knocking out those rote tasks where you're like, this is taking way too much time. I need an assistant to do this. Or my favorite, which is enhancing our strategic value. So when you think about your workflows and those of your peers, what are some of the either tools or platforms or workflows enabled by AI that have really changed your workday?
The easiest is something that a lot of people probably wouldn't consider, but really has been a game changer for me, which is automating a very repetitive task of receipt analysis. We have a lot of receipts come through social media that need to be split out. For those not familiar with an agency structure, you're often going to split an amount on a receipt between different jobs or outlines, each with their own budgets, if you will. And because social media platforms don't have the ability to easily update how a receipt comes to you, you're kind of getting everything at once. So if I'm running 2 different campaigns, they're both going to show up on the same receipt. Well, as a result, somebody needs to go through that and figure out how much money goes where, and then note it for processing from our financial side. It sounds very boring, and it can be very boring, especially, but it can also be a lot, because we have campaigns where we'll launch, all of a sudden $20,000 or $100,000 in a month. And when we're limited in the size of the receipt, that's 100 receipts we have to process. So we have a custom GPT that's trained to analyze receipts and provide a naming structure and the math that we need only for us. So it's trained in the style that we're trying to go for. It uses the structure we want. It's trained on our examples. It does not connect to the internet in the traditional sense, only through a GPT interface. And although it's only 10 receipts at a time, it's a game changer for me. My personal estimation is a 30 to 40% increase in processing speed, more if there's only a couple different jobs at any given time. But we have receipts that can go up to 7 jobs. And so I've shifted from having to do all of the math myself to double checking what's coming out. And so far, there's been 1 inaccuracy on the AI's part and 5 inaccuracies on my part that I messed up on the receipt structure beforehand, and a 98% success rate, I would say, without really any changes needed at all. It's hard to overestimate.
Yeah, I love that example because that's an example of a persistent problem. It's kind of shocking to me. I mean, no shade to the social media companies, but the way the billing structure and the receipts come. Well, I am throwing a little bit of shade.
It's okay. Throw the shade.
Crazy from a business perspective that this is still how the billing is done. And for any paid media teams, we have the Morgan Myers team doing paid media. We have the GNS Business Communications team doing paid media. It really is a burden. So I think you've hit those buckets of knocking out rote tasks and solving for persistent pain points. The other thing this brings up for me is the idea of AI as an agent that assists you. And I think, we've thought in terms, so we had to learn to think about the internet as an entity. Then we had to think about kind of that social internet. Then we thought about apps. We got trained to think about things from an app perspective, not just through mobile. It came through mobile, but now it's like even apps, you think about it even in a desktop perspective in a way. So now we're being trained to think about agents, right? So how would you define for our listeners, hopefully people are following this, but how do you think about that word, either app or agent, in the context of some of the things that you're starting to build and use?
So for me, an agent I would consider as something that can persistently make its own decisions, whether that's allowing it to operate off of its own schedule, control a specific piece of software. There's a little bit of nebulousness when it comes to what is an agent, and I think that's okay because this is all still so new that we're not going to have like exact definitions. But it helps, even in the name itself, anybody largely understand what it is. Think of an intern who you trust enough to do a specific task. For me, I'm exploring a lot of ways that we can set up agents either for creating projects, building out things ahead of time, or on our social listening side, which I help with a lot, that could be competitive analysis. So repeat competitive analysis, just updating me on key trends ahead of my chance to actually review the results that are coming in. So it's almost priming from an almost real-time perspective my work as I go in to understand a competitor and what our clients need to know on them. So still looking at the structures for those. Yeah.
Definition, a way of thinking about it. And you're right. I think we're reaching toward that and we're hearing what the promise of that will be. It kind of harkens back to what your trends were regarding connection and connectivity of the major LLMs with other parts of our lives, like the shopping piece or social media, airline booking. One thing that's funny about those connection points is I actually ran into this week is with the note-taking apps like Otter and read.ai, and how you open the door a tiny bit and they're in there connecting to everything, and suddenly you have a read.ai reader showing up to your Teams meeting before you get there. And I'm like, I did not intend this, my friend, but thank you so much for being so aggressive.
Yep. Getting emails saying, oh, here's your recap of a meeting, not even realizing that the assistant was plugged in there, which double-edged, but so far has been beneficial.
No, it's very funny. And obviously in our environment using Microsoft 365 and enabling Copilot for all staff, where and starting to build out apps, I think they're almost pre-agents, but building out tools in every part of our business, from the client side to operations to everything, IT support, et cetera, using it to work smarter, not harder. It kind of points us in that direction. I read an interesting article, and I'm CEO at our group, about how, this generation of CEOs will be the last to only have human employees. They'll also be agent employees. And that to me was one of those moments, like you describing, hey, this is how I understand agents, that they have some agency. I had to stop for a minute and be like, that's really interesting, because I feel like I've been managing technology as a strategic asset for a very long time. But understanding without anthropomorphizing, understanding like agents will be part of that workforce, what do you think about that? How does that sit for you? Do you feel like that's the future we're heading towards?
I do think that's the future. And I've been thinking a lot about a quote. I'm not going to get it quite right, but essentially it says, the output, every system is perfectly designed to output what it outputs. So like however a system is made, whatever you're getting out of the system, that's what it's designed to do. So if you want to change what's made, you need to change the design. I'm not sure that AI fully fits that mold, because you could be as accurate as you want, and there is still technically the potential for something to come out that was unexpected, because we don't truly have a grasp on how the back end technology works. That's like a human. You know, I've been there myself. I've been an intern. I can be trusted with the best possible instructions and go horribly wrong or go the wrong direction with it. So there is a bit of a management approach. It's reflecting, it's responding, encouraging, asking maybe for a redo on things. Those are skill sets that people probably didn't expect, and certainly not ones you'd apply to technology in many cases. You know, when IT departments started to exist, people might have managed computers, but they probably expected the computer to be accurate all the time. And while AI is getting more and more accurate over time, there's still going to be that element. Whether it's coming from the fact that we're using natural language conversations, that could be part of it, because language is tricky. Things mean different things, different people, or if it's just going to be an inbuilt piece of the tech as a whole. My guess is, and like what you were reading and like others have reported on, management skills are going to be very, very common all the way down to really anybody in an organization that touches a computer.
That's a really great point. I like that a lot. Um, you've made a point in our AI team meetings, and we've actually been trying to advocate for this across our organization and also with our clients, which is to get over the overwhelming nature of AI, because not everybody is feeling like immediately super technical or hands-on. Like some people have been exploring it for a very long time, as you have. Others are coming to it in the course of their job, and there's a big self-education process. But one of the ways we've framed it is, how do you start with a need or a problem to solve and think of that first versus what can AI do or what should I do with AI? Why do you think that's an important way of thinking about this, especially as practitioners in our space?
I think it's the easiest way to start understanding the capabilities of a tool like AI. I mean, we can have 1,000 use cases. We can have a prompt library that does anything you can imagine. And yet tomorrow we're going to find out, oh, all of a sudden you can shop in ChatGPT now. Like, there is no predicting what this tool can do. And there doesn't at the moment appear to be an upper limit, because if there's anything digital related, it probably can. But as a person, you know what your challenges are. You understand better than anybody else, not only what is needed in your role, but also what is sometimes wrong. I think a good way to position this is, you know, you're still an expert in what you do. So if you're using a tool like artificial intelligence, you can spot when the output doesn't align with what's right. And so if you start thinking about ways that you can solve something that's really annoying, for me, that was receipts, it can open up a whole world. I mean, eventually I was getting recommendations for how to code, like, you know, hard code in analysis tools and connect back to cloud APIs and all that stuff that's not in my wheelhouse, although I feel a lot more confident now because I got to go through that exploratory journey. Thankfully, I found that ChatGPT was able to do it on its own using existing systems or the custom GPT framework. But that opened my eyes in a way that trying to read every study never could. Now, when I go and I come across a new problem, the way I even phrase it or coach it to an AI tool is going to be different, because I have a better understanding of how the technology works, which I think is really important. A lot of people don't get the chance to really know like how something is generated back to you. So that's number one. But then also how it solves some of my existing pain points in ways that I didn't expect. The outcome wasn't necessarily what I expected when I started using the tool to solve a pain point.
I think it's going to be transformative for us as we continue bringing all of our colleagues along in this journey. And everybody has so much to bring to the table. I'm seeing such creative, smart, but also, you know, appropriate uses across our agencies. Like, and it's really gaining momentum, obviously. But I don't take that for granted, because it has to be super intentional. And what I love is the idea that we have folks around Morgan Myers and GNS Business Communications, and on our client side too, as partners, different people who are more into this or have skill sets, or they have more experience where they can say, hey, you considered this. And it's really more of a consultative mode. It's like the way which we work with clients, which is, come to me and ask me your questions, ask me what you're trying to solve for, and I bet you we can find a use case. Because you're right, just listing use cases will make you insane, because there's so many of them.
And a big piece of this that people often don't consider is that you can fully build out a project and then use AI to figure out what you missed. That's another way to consider it, because you can almost do a negative parameter. Like, say I'm planning an event and, you know, I've kind of got a location down. I've got a lot of themes written out. I have an idea of the weather. I can upload a version of that event to ChatGPT and say, this is what I already know. What have I missed? It sounds simple, but you might be surprised at what comes out to fill in the gaps you might not be aware of. So that's another spot that we've been exploring. I know that our SEO experts have been looking at websites and they're starting to say, hey, what is missing from this FAQ that should be here that would support our SEO efforts, just for example.
That's a great example. One of the concepts I came across, I think it was on Freakonomics. It was on one of the Freakonomics podcasts with Stephen Dubner, and they had an expert on it. It was a series he did on failure, and he had an expert on talking about the idea of kind of projecting forward. I guess you're starting a project to sort of stand at the end and say, imagine we failed, what went wrong? And I think that to me is a trick of the human brain to get you out of the box, like the metaphorical, I'm in the box. Like, how do you get out of the box, which is a real pat thing. But there's a real reality to that, which is I need to get like physically, mentally in another space. And I love that idea of using ChatGPT to do that very experience. Either what am I missing or this is the plan, what might have failed? What if we fail, what will have gone wrong? And and that's really, again, augmented intelligence. It's pushing us to think about things differently with a partner.
Which is the way to think about it. You're unlikely to still get a result from AI that can really compete with an expert in a field. It can occur, it's possible, but if you want repeated excellence, you're better off training your expert to use an AI tool to augment what they do, and then your results are going to be much stronger. I mean, you've read Co-Intelligence, you know that the data backs that up as well. Human plus AI is much better than human or AI on their own.
And, speaking of that, as we start to wrap up, agriculture and food, but both have a lot of specialization, especially agriculture. You look at image generation. Is the corn that's going to be generated looking right? Is it the correct height? Is it, it's just those things that those of you've worked in that field for years or grew up in that space would know intuitively. It's hard for systems to know. So when you think about your peers and colleagues out there, especially in the ag space or the food space from a digital side, what are some tips for those really committed to engagement and self-education and getting started? How would you counsel folks to think about this or dive in?
I think there's a good 3-step process that I'd first recommend. And number one is just simply start prompting, start asking questions. When ChatGPT was released, my initial approach, which I'm not going to say is correct for now, but worked then, was to do a different prompt every day for a month. Whatever I could think of, the most unusual things. Act as though you're this famous person. What do you think about this historical event? Outline the recent news. Can you help me write some code? Really anything you can imagine, usually even connected back to your personal life. Start up deploying that in a way that you get a sense of how the tool thinks and how it works. And really any artificial intelligence option will work for this. Copilot, ChatGPT, Google Gemini, they all should be open for that. But as you're doing that, you're going to naturally learn how to prompt better because you're not going to like the responses. An AI might learn from you, but you're going to learn from it at the same time. So as you're doing that process, explore prompt recommendations. We've got some really good frameworks internally. There's frameworks out there that you can use. One of my favorites is to make sure that the tool, you tell it how you want it to think. So act as though you're the CEO of a large marketing firm. How would you respond to the strategic plan? What did I miss? Those are the kinds of things you would do. Don't be afraid of using natural language. My first reaction was to maybe go with the Google search approach of this is really an index that I need to specify, and I kind of understand how it works, so I'm going to avoid sounding like a human. I'm just going to search query. Doesn't work as well. Natural language is totally fine to use because the tool adapts to it. So once you've done those two things where you've started prompting and then you start understanding how to change your prompts, then you're largely set to go into the broader area of AI, whatever that is, whether that's back-end technical analysis for you, image generation, or strategy. I think that those are the initial things that I would do. And they sound basic, but really you need to have 10 hours or more into these tools before you start to do it right and start to really like your results. My first AI generated images were horrible. Something between a peacock and a John Deere tractor came out. I don't really know what happened there, but not as cool as I thought, or not as cool as maybe it's described as. But nowadays I'm a lot more comfortable with it. I understand the parameters and how the technology works. And so not that I always get everything I wish for, but I'm able to get closer to my ideal. So using those as the approaches is what I would do. And once you've got that, I know it sounds odd to like leave the technical learning and the framework till after you've experimented. But I really do think experimenting is more valuable. And then you can go back and say, okay, here's this system I learned online called Craft, which is one of our internal frameworks that we deploy. How can I think back on what I've done before in a way that would make it better had I used this? So you need to grow at the same time that the tool is learning about you.
Yeah, I love that. And part of it is really just getting hands-on with it, because one of the things I talk about a lot, you've heard me talk about this, is that when there's something that's truly very new and you've grown up in a different time, a different set of tools, um, interrupting your own workflow, like intentionally, is hard, because your brain doesn't naturally like, oh yeah, I have all these uses for AI, because it didn't exist before in that way for you, for most people. So I love that. And I think the idea, and you mentioned Co-Intelligence, a book by Ethan Mollick of Stanford, for anyone who hasn't read it. It's a good, I mean, it feels like, again, it was published a long time ago because everything's moving so fast, but he is really looking at it from a very human, but also a business leader, not a technologist. Like his academic study is business. And so I think he's thinking about it in a great way. And to put in 10 hours to get familiar is a lot easier than 10,000, which is the old mastery, level. So getting hands-on is great. So there's always one final question here on Building Brand Gravity, which is, what has you in its gravity these days? What are you into? What are you reading? What are you thinking about, Lauren?
There's two that come to mind for me. First off is the book Dune. Obviously, we've had some good Dune movies come out, but there's a very interesting approach to artificial intelligence in that series that is informative. It's often not really considered, but if you like to approach big ideas through the vein of fiction, that's a good way to do it. Another one, and I'm really showing my nerd card here, but Andor, the Star Wars TV show, has just released its second season. And unlike many, isn't a lot of this technological deployment. It's made like a traditional movie. There's a lot more real sets. There's a lot less, CGI backgrounds, which I'm drawn to as I get more into using tools like AI. I also, on the opposite side, like to go more towards fully human created things for my entertainment. So I don't know why that is. That's just kind of the way my subconscious has been going recently, but I've been drawn into both.
I love it. Those are great recommendations. And I think the continuing relevance of fiction like Dune, as we come into these more and more modern societies, sometimes it ends up like very dystopic, but I think also it's really interesting, like you mentioned Asimov early on, like how do we as humans think about living side by side with machines, the good, the scary, the bad, and let's try to create the world we want to live in. But Lauren King, again, thank you so much for being a guest today on Building Brand Gravity. I really always appreciate our conversations.
Absolutely.
Wow. I mean, that's really what makes Lauren's perspective just so valuable. And what I really liked about that discussion, Ann, is, he wasn't just reflecting on the present state of technology and brand. He was really pushing us to reimagine the role humanity should play in the continued evolution of AI and technology. And I guess my takeaway when I heard that was that if you're a leading brand or a team right now, my big takeaway from that is don't just react to technology, design with intention, right? Use narrative, use imagination. And I like how he encouraged us to even consider fiction, as a tool to help you shape a strategy. And maybe most importantly, and I know you say this all the time, you can put technology at the center, but you cannot lose that human thread. So I really like that idea of let's try and create the world we want to live in. Yet powerful stuff.
I think it's great. And the thing that's wonderful about Lauren, too, is his enthusiasm and his deep, deep driving curiosity. When we get on the call, I mean, we could have chatted about 7 billion things, aside from our work as practitioners and our sectors that we're specialized in the technology. But I think it's that that is an example of what we all need to bring to this, the enthusiasm, the curiosity, the excitement, and the ability to connect the dots. And also what I love, I'm seeing this a lot more, not just in our firm, but, as I circulate around, a lot of sense of shared responsibility to be counselors to one another. So how do we help our peers and colleagues come up to speed, solve for problems? There are going to always be earlier adopters. There's going to be technology coming like it always has. And there's people who it just is like breathing air. It totally makes sense. I mean, if you remember that story Lauren told, he first was engaging with AI years ago when he was so much younger as a teenager. And so this has been a long journey for him, despite him being a bit younger than you and I. So I think that idea of helping your peers, those of us who are natural adopters on certain aspects of it, looking to say, hey, come to me with a problem to solve because this is a whole new world. And that is what makes me excited about the pivot to come, I think.
Well, and it also struck me as I was just hearing you talk right now, you had made a comment. We do every year an employee survey and a road show, and Anne made a comment that she said, we are going to be the first generation who is not just going to manage humans. We are going to be managing AI agents, and just kind of that bifurcation. So as we're trying to create that world we want to live in, that's something that's out there. And it kind of struck me, we always like to end this thinking about what's in our gravity, and this conversation of that just really reminded me of a article I saw in the Wall Street Journal recently by Isabella Basquette. And the title was, Walmart is preparing to welcome its next customer, the AI shopping agent. And it was just fascinating to think about that build from what we were talking about. And pardon me, I was just going to read a little bit of this, but it said Walmart is preparing for sweeping changes in the way customers shop, investigating how to make products appealing not just to human consumers, but also to the AI agents that will one day shop on their behalf. At some point in the future, shoppers will deploy an agent and tell it that they want to restock on groceries or buy a new flat screen TV. The operator will then scan the internet and service relevant products based on what it knows about the user's preference, and ultimately, the agents may even be able to complete the purchase, including payment. So, wow. Talk about the marrying of the human and the AI. Talk about reimagining a world or thinking ahead. I think that's like a perfect blend of your conversation with Lauren and just the change we're seeing as we try and create this new world.
There's a great little clip that's been going around on social about a month or two ago. And I think it's real, but you have to ask yourself questions about it. But it sort of showed the interaction between like one AI agent trying to book a hotel, and the hotel had its own AI agent. And when they both realized I'm anthropomorphizing them, they're like, oh, let's communicate in more computer code, like, like bloops, bleeps, ones and zeros than human language. And so they start to, I think it might be legit. Others may have seen it. If it's fake, I totally own that. But I think it's a real metaphor, which is there's going to be so much of that AI agent to AI agent interaction. And the question of what really, and Lauren said it too in the call, what really is agentic AI? Where are agents? Like, they're going to be coming, and I think it's going to be both fast and organic at the same time. It's funny because one of the things that I was in my gravity when we were reflecting, building brand gravity, was this point about two stats I've heard, or two comments I've heard recently. One was yours about the fact that even entry level, I think it was the CEO of Jasper.ai said this in a Fortune CEO newsletter that Diane Brady does. He said, for entry level folks, we're going to have to be thinking about their management skills because they'll be managing AI agents as if they're like an intern or they're a colleague. The other quote I'd heard is that this generation of CEOs will be the last to only manage human employees, that there will be agents as well. And I've always thought of technology as a strategic asset, but now I have to think about it almost as workers. And I think that's a big psychological shift that we need to make. The other more fun thing I have in my gravity is many people are listening to this because it's already shooting to the top of the podcast list. But Amy Poehler's new podcast, Good Hang, is a joy bomb. It's a bomb of joy. It's fun. Jack Black, Tina Fey. She just had Michelle Obama on. It's very interesting to see more of these types of figures enter the podcast game. And as we have a podcast too in our own little world, I'm always looking for, what are they doing and how are they doing it? So I definitely recommend that to others.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That sounds exciting.
Well, we're coming to the end of another episode. Thank you for those who listened to both parts of the AI miniseries. As Steve said, if you didn't listen to the one with Greg, go back and check it out. And as always, find us wherever you find your podcasts and on YouTube. And we really thank you for listening.
Have a great day. Tune in soon. We'll be back with more exciting conversations on how we can build brand gravity.